Bird Island, Lighthouse and Lighthouse Island. Nope. The bird sanctuary's on Muir Island, and the lighthouse is in Bird Island. That's far more sensible, isn't it? Turned into a bit of a sprawl of modern houses, but it grew in Victoria, Scottish, the Scottish mainland or Scottish islands, and it does get pretty close, but not as close as that. We're at the top of Larne Loch now, and the land over on the other side is called Island McGee. Okay. My mum grew up in this part of the world, and she would talk about going to the Goblins when she was a girl, but glass bridges and opened it all up again. Unfortunately, last summer there was a landslide at the beginning of the season and they had to close it, but it's going to reopen in June, and I'm hoping to get to see it. So we're staying here for a while. That's one, two. Barn, which was used to be the inn at the crossroads. The crossroads is where the King's Road, which is one of whom decided to stay. Now there is another old stone hall. In fact, it doesn't even look natural. Well, that's because it's entirely man-made. That's the spoil heap for Macromorn Quarry. All the stuff they dug out of the ground that wasn't limestone, they dumped it into a mess hall. Also there, the only other thing I know of that's been filmed inside in the Linen Mill, 4, 5, 6, castle number 6, is Overfleet Castle. There's a ruin just on a little... It's very rare, there are thousands of them around the world, and usually when you take on a McDonald's franchise, it's like a license to print money, but it didn't work. It's odd, the Larne people, they're a strange bunch. It's not that they don't like burgers or that they only like Burger King burgers, because they will travel along the coast to Carrickfergus, to McDonald's, and buy burgers there, but they wouldn't go and buy them in the one in their own town. Very, very strange lot. Now at the last junction you maybe noticed a sign, a little brown sign that pointed to the right and said Chain Memorial Tower. It's a lovely traditional Irish round stone tower right on the shore. Built as a memorial to a man who did a lot of fine things for the town, including creating the town park. The entrance is just on our right now, and it runs along the shore behind the houses on our right. And the end of it is coming up here, this little section. This is another way in. Now, he was quite a character. He loved the town and the sea, and left instructions that he was to be buried in the park, and his grave is just behind the head. And the reason it's a mound is the instructions he left were that he was to be buried standing up, facing out to sea. So as if he could enjoy the view out to Scotland. It's quite good today.
Where is Scotland?
Some days we see the ships coming in and out. There's a fishing boat, probably getting lobster pots or something by the look of it. Now that big piece of land ahead and to the right, that's the Mull of Kintyre, part of the Scottish mainland, and we'll talk more about that. At our closest point we'll be only 14 miles from that. If you'd wanted to make this journey 200 years ago, to draw up new maps and rename all the towns and villages. When they got to Ken Bain, they asked the locals to explain what that meant, and they pointed to the white chalky headland above the town and said it means white head. So in this place called Drains Bay, and I thought, why would you go and sit on the beach when there are lots of drain pipes? You know what 6-year-old boys are like. They have very vivid imaginations and they take things very literally. So that was what I imagined. Now we're now on that drive that the travel writers liked so much, and over the next couple of hours the scenery just gets better and better and better. This episode, there was an execution. I don't need to tell you any more than that. It was filmed on that hillside right ahead of us. Also there, the little hump just below the peak is where Littlefinger and Sansa stood in season 5. They were looking out over Moat Cailin, which was computer generated round about where we are, and they had an interesting conversation. And then the cliffs to the left of that, they might be familiar, and further on round, tucked behind the houses, there's a little wooded area where in season 6 we met Brother Ray and his group, and he reintroduced us to an old friend. But also up there on that hillside we've seen the Knights of the Vale riding along. Jamie stopped when he was travelling home to King's Landing to let Qyburn tend a wound that he had. Bran and Rickon, Hodor and Usha, when they left Winterfell to go on a journey, they stopped and looked back at their home from that hillside. Brienne and Pod were riding along having a conversation, so it's been used a lot, and because of that, one of the Game of Thrones doors has been placed in the Ballygally Castle Hotel. Now, the castle is right ahead of us, that little brown building. The original castle on that site was built in the 13th century, but that one only goes back to 1625. So nearly 400 years old. The white buildings around it that form the rest of the hotel, they're modern, they've been built in the last couple of decades. It's a very fine hotel, lovely place. Now, the castle is still haunted by the White Lady, and apparently the arrangement is, if you can manage to stay, there are a few of the hotel bedrooms are in the tower, if you can stay the whole night without the White Lady scaring you out, stay for the whole night, you don't have to pay. So that seems interesting. I should explain the Game of Thrones doors. Our last stop today is at what for many people when we get there. And the last two, Glenshesque is the Valley of the Reeds, and Glentazey or Glentau. Glentau is the older name, but Glentazey because Princess Tazy from Rathlin Island loved that little valley, so the people named it in her honour, and it is very pretty. One of my favourites. I have about 6 favourites out of the 9. So of work for extras. So it's become a major employer in Northern Ireland. It is our main filming location, but they did some quite substantial scenes in Spain as well. Now in the distance we can see the village of Carnlough, where we'll be stopping in a moment, with its limestone quarry above it. And as we turn now, we're coming into Glenarm, which slightly confusingly is the name of both the valley and the village. And of course it has its own limestone quarry, imagine that. You'll come to hate those two words. The two big industries along this coast have been limestone quarrying and fishing. You maybe noticed the fish farm out in the bay, and there's another one a little bit further up the coast. So fishing used to be the major industry, salmon in particular, but we overfished, and now the only salmon you'll get will come from those farms. Now Glenarm, there's been no filming here, though, and more left Ireland never to return, looking for work. Food. Indeed, as far as I know, we still haven't quite got back to the population levels that we had almost 200 years ago. So that was the degree of impact of that famine. Now, she didn't want her people to die or to go away, so she made extra work for them, building a new railway line from the quarry down to the harbour and rebuilding the harbour. And I'm very glad she did that, because it was that reconstructed harbour that brought the caster nets out from the shore. Back in the 1960s, when I was a wee boy, having my holidays on the north coast, 10 men, just convince him that he's invincible. So that worked very well for Brian Baru. Now, with the Shadow Assassin, it was a different sense. It wasn't about sound, it was about sight. There were some people who saw the Shadow Assassin and they weren't harmed. They may well have been horrified, but now you can see how green the brown glen. Glen Dunn means brown glen, brown valley. It's not brown at all, it's very, very green, as you'll see better as we climb the hill here. Now, I just discovered yesterday, doing more research, that this road is known by the locals as the Corkscrew. You'll see why in a moment. A couple of months back, and she knew a lot about these things, and her theory, and it makes some sense, is that she said to me, that's because of the sheep. And I thought, what has sheep got to do with the river? She said, no, well, just as the rain washes the peat down into the river, it also washes the lanolin out of the sheep's wool, and lanolin is a soapy substance, so that would make the water foam up. Seems reasonable to me, but I don't know why there are anybody coming down just like that. Sorry, Sean, I wished that on you, didn't I? I should have kept my mouth. And round the next corner, there might be a surprise, or there might not. Now you think, oh, what is it? Some sort of wild animal, or people doing something interesting. Well, when I tell you the thing that might be there or might not is a lake, you think that's a bit odd. Well, Loch Arima is known as the Vanishing Lake, and some days it's here, some days it's not. It's certainly 2 weeks ago there was a full lake down in the bottom of the dip ahead of us. Last weekend there was nothing, and it looks like it's still that way today. Yep, it's all gone. Now when the lake's full, it comes right up to on our right, just where we are now, and on the left it starts just now. You can see the reedy ground, so all of that should be flooded. We should be now on a causeway across the middle of the lake. To our right, those piles of stones, those are cairns that should be on an island. Actually, the lake's starting to come back up again. There it is, it's filling up a little bit. But you can see where the ground is dark, and that should all be underwater. And 2 weeks ago it was. Tomorrow there might be a full lake there, or there might be nothing. It was eventually laid to rest in the grounds of Bonamargie Friary, which is just coming up on our left now across the golf course. Quite a few of the members of the MacDonald family, certainly the 15th and the 16th century ones, were buried in that graveyard. Someday I'm going to come up and try to find the grave. But I don't know if his will be marked. As we've come down the hill, you've seen the whole of Ballycastle. Not a big town. In the past it was an important seaport. Today the only ferries that run are out to Rathlin. There'll be 4 or 5 a day in the high season, but not so many at this time of year. Now the thing for which Ballycastle is probably best known is the Owl Lammas Fair. Originally it was a horse fair held on the last Monday and Tuesday of August each year. It grew over the years so that the farmers would come and they'd buy their winter clothes and food and all sorts of things. Today it's more of a fun fair, and you can buy just about any old rubbish, but it takes over the whole town for a couple of days at the end of the summer season. Now, as I've said, it's not a big town, doesn't have a theatre or Ballycastle. And then just a few years ago, Richard Branson, the head of the Virgin Empire, was on one of his adventures. He was trying to cross the Atlantic by hot air balloon. The plan was that he would land in Scotland, but it wasn't going too well. They were getting lower and lower, and nothing they could do would help them to gain height again. So they were worried they were going to have to ditch in the water. Fortunately, they managed to make night to stop them being stolen. And when I heard that, I thought, how do you get the sheep up the cliffs? Well, you don't. You go around the back where there's a path. That's what they did. Now we've seen it. This little area here at Larryban and next door. But anyway, back to Una. So she said, don't worry about him, Finn. We'll dress you up as a baby, you lie and sleep in the corner, and I'll sort out Ben and Donna. So no sooner had they got Finn in the corner than Ben and Donna arrived. Now the most distant piece of land is ahead and to the right, just a dark shadow on a day like this, is an island called Rathlin. Today it's part of Northern Ireland. It has been an Irish island, I suppose, for most of its history, but it's been a part of Scotland, part of the Kingdom of Dalriada, which was the western side of Scotland, plus basically the northeastern corner of Ireland that's now Northern Ireland. And Rathlin was part of that. Of course, that was cut off from England by a wall built 2,000 years ago by the Romans, Hadrian's Wall. And I remember when we first visited Castle Black at the beginning of the first season of Game of Thrones, I just laughed and thought, Hadrian's Wall, a wall built to keep the hairy, scary people away from the civilized people in the south, and that was the idea. So of course Dalriada, in a way, when you're here, you're north of the wall, but the Rathlan's part of that. Now Rathlan's had a fascinating history. It was there in the throwing. I kept trying and trying until it succeeded, and that inspired Robert. He thought, if that wee spider can keep trying till it succeeds, so can I. So he went back to Scotland, he tried again, and he did succeed. He became the King of Scotland, and indeed his brother Edward the Bruce for a time was known as the King of Ireland, though he only ruled. Good location at the mouth of Belfast Loch, safe anchorage for a fleet if you needed that. There had previously been a castle there, indeed the name Carrick Fergus means the rock of Fergus. King Fergus built a wooden castle on the same rock on which John de Courcy built his. Hopefully we're going to get a first glimpse of the Scottish coastline. Looks like it's fairly clear over there today. It's one of those things that varies a lot. Some days we get fabulous views of Scotland. But before we get that far, out to our right you'll maybe see three little islands. They're called the Coast. Now along the far side on the Irish sea coast there's a lovely walkway called the Gobbins. Now originally it was built in Victorian times. They were great at these things. There were lots of little cast iron bridges over chasms, and we're going to see today. They're very different to each other, but the castle is over the wall. We'll get quite a reasonable view of it. Just before the bend here. This time of the year with the leaves off the trees, it's not too hidden. And there, as you can see, it's completely intact. And you might think, well, it was built in 1756, so it's 261 years old, so surely it's a museum now, it's just a place you can go and visit. No. And she did that because it was that reconstructed harbour that brought the show to Carnlough. When my colleague Brian was designing this show, this tour back at the beginning of last year, he said, we'll stop at Carnlough, where people can stretch their legs, use the toilets, get a cup of coffee, you buy some. I'd hate to see what would happen if that young man was ever stuck in a real battle with a real sword and his life depended on it. But maybe that's what we're supposed to think. Sometimes they set us up for these things, don't they? Game of Thrones, Game of Surprises. Maybe he'd be the great hero. As Azor Ahai, in the books, the grand ideas, and he called it Newtown Glens, but nobody liked that, so it's back to Incushin. Now, Turnley lived just outside Carnlough, where we stopped last, and the Banshee legend was that if a soldier heard the Banshee wail on the night before he went into battle, it was a sign he would die the following day. So the chieftains used to get High King of Ireland, and he said to his men, boys, you've got it the wrong way round. If you hear a Banshee wail, you're going to live. It's the ones who don't hear the Banshee who will die. And then of course he got his women to wail round his own camp, made sure that everybody heard them, and the boys would say, did you hear that? We're into the river. So that's... And when it meets the sea, the sea is a tall rough. I was hooked. and I'm sure some of you know what that's like. I had quite a few people actually out last summer during the broadcast of season 6 who said to me, don't tell us anything about season 6 because we're not going to watch it until we've got all 10 episodes saved up. We can't bear to wait a week to see what happens next.